Hi, this is Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and joined by Sheldon Richman, the vice president of the foundation. This is the Libertarian Angle, the show, that brings you the libertarian perspectives on the burning issues of the day, unlike those boring shows that you see on television and the articles you read in the mainstream press, which is your standard statist perspective. They're trapped in the statist box, and so they engage in these silly debates on, whether there should be uniforms in public schools or not, and because they can't break out of the statist box that asks, why should there even be public schools? Well, that's what this show does. It brings you the libertarian perspective on these things. Sheldon, there's a great debate that's going on right now over at the Cato Institute. I'm participating in this debate. Anybody that wants to access it, it can be found at cato-unbound.org. And the debate's on national service. There is an interesting debate where the first guy comes out with the libertarian case for mandatory military service, if you can believe that. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So this guy makes this case as to why libertarians should believe in force in terms of mandatory military service. And then there's a Cato response, and then another guy's weighed in with voluntary government service, and then I've weighed in with the title of my article, destroying freedom in the attempt to save freedom, which is really addressing the first guy. But now the give and take is taking place. So if you want to participate, there's plenty of room for comments, and should be a stimulating time. There's already a bunch of comments especially taking this guy to task for making such a ridiculous argument. But anyway, Sheldon, I know you've addressed this a lot, this concept of national service. So I thought maybe I'd ask you to weigh in on this debate taking place over there.
Yeah, well, of course, you and I both have over the years. I did it as recently as June on FFF.org because it was timed with a new discussion. I mean, this comes up every year. One of the things that causes it to come up every year is that Time Magazine for 6 or 7 years has done a cover story on the need for national service. And they typically include military as one option. And now we can divide this up. I assume the person who wrote the essay to which you responded was calling for mandatory military service, what we call the conscription or the draft. And the libertarian case on that ought to be quite well known. I mean, that's a form of short-term slavery. Of course, since it's military service, it may be terminal slavery because you could get killed. Quote, doing your service. But what I try to point out in my article, I was specifically referring to people that want to make it military as well as so-called civilian service, like through AmeriCorps, and they like to stress that they're not calling for mandatory service. They've kind of given up the argument, at least these other people, maybe not this one guy you were talking about or responding to. They've given up the idea of actually compelling people. Maybe they feel that the population wouldn't go for that, but they want it to be let's say nearly compulsory because they want to create an ethic where everyone expects that after you get out of high school you spend 1 or 2 years in some kind of civilian or military service, and they want to bring about, a country in which, or society in which, when you go to get a job as a young person, the first question asked of you is, where'd you do your service? Or if you apply for college, the first question asked you by the enrollment interviewer would be, where did you do your service? So it seems like they almost want to make it more difficult for you to get a job or go to college if you haven't done this. So that's pushing it really in the direction of compulsory service. Of course, our answer is, why don't they trust free people to do the right thing? I thought we believe in freedom.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that the pressure will ultimately be brought to bear, the stigma to really induce people to do this type of thing. What's brought to my mind is the old Blue Eagle campaign of the Franklin Roosevelt administration, where they were trying to get businessmen to post the Blue Eagle of the National Industrial Recovery Act, which ultimately was declared in violation of the Constitution. But they were trying to get businessmen to participate in this, and if a businessman refused to, there would be ostracism and protests and demonstrations and boycotts of his store, all designed to get him to do this. And that's what they ultimately end up doing with these government programs. If people don't participate in them, they start putting the pressure on. And let's face it, Sheldon, these programs, let's take the voluntary service, the AmeriCorps stuff. They're really designed to do what the Army does and really what public schooling does, is to get all the young people involved in these programs so that they can inculcate in them the same mindset that they do in the Army, that they do in the public schools, a mindset of deference to authority, obedience, respect for authority, don't challenge the government at a fundamental level, adopt the statist paradigm, operate within the statist paradigm, don't rock the boat at all. And that's what any government history that has these youth programs is involved with. And so what we really, I think, need to do is question this thing at a fundamental level. What role does government have helping people? Why should there be a national service to help people? That's what a private sector is all about. That's what, Mother Teresa is all about. That's what mutual aid societies are all about. Your church groups, your March of Dimes. That's the only meaningful part of voluntary service is when it's done in the private sector. And then you've got the whole market economy concept, where producers who are seeking a profit inevitably advance the interests of mankind. They serve mankind. Look what Bill Gates has done for mankind. And so when we combine those two things, the voluntary things that people do for others, along with the profit-seeking things where they serve consumers in the marketplace, that's really what it's all about, Sheldon.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is sort of a solution in search of a problem. There are already many outlets for people that want to do volunteer work of all kinds. You can work with Salvation Army. You can go down and work at the soup kitchen. You can help homeless people. I mean, there are many organizations, and there's nothing to stop people from starting additional organizations if they want. So the question is, what is this really out to accomplish? And I think you hit on it in this inculcation argument. It's the idea that, notice they always use the phrase national service. They don't just talk about volunteerism to help people that are less fortunate. They want service to the nation. They want to inculcate an ethic that you owe, even if they're not going to make it strictly compulsory, you owe something to the nation. That's the language they speak, and I think that's where we have to attack it. I mean, there were some very unattractive people in history who talked in those terms, particularly some dictators during the 1930s in Europe. But that was the center of really the state religion of say fascist Italy, to take an example. Now, I'm not saying these people are fascists, but I'm saying they share a common element, this idea that the nation is something that is owed service. But that seems to be not the way Americans have thought about their society over many years. The idea was if the nation was anything, it was supposed to create an environment in which you could be free to pursue your dreams. And sure, if people want to do service, that's all well, that's admirable, that's great. It's fine for people to encourage them in that, to bring your children up thinking that way, to help people who have it tough. But the idea that government should be demanding of people, even if it isn't, again, outright coercive, demanding of people that they give service to the nation, that is a very ominous idea that needs to be attacked. It's portrayed as something noble. We have to show that it is not something noble.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Jim Bovard has done some fantastic work on the AmeriCorps. If you want to just Google James Bovard and AmeriCorps, you'll see a bunch of articles pop up. And come to our website at fff.org. He's got some stuff there. He's got an article coming up in our journal that Sheldon edits, Future of Freedom. And he's shown that the projects that these government agencies like AmeriCorps do are ridiculous projects, that they're destructive projects. And so you have this phenomenon where you're pulling people out of the private sector, which is the productive sector, and it's not totally voluntary because they're going to have to earn a salary. So you're going to have to be taxing people to fund their salaries, in addition to taxing people to pay for all the bureaucrats running these programs. So you're really hurting the productive aspects that are taking place in the private sector. And this is what liberals, in the modern day corrupted sense of the term, they don't understand. They don't understand what is it that creates wealth. And that's something that we libertarians do understand. Wealth is created in the private sector. That's what raises standards of living. That's what helps the poor. But Sheldon, let me shift grounds unless you want to add something else here. Let me shift over to Syria.
Can I add one more point on this? Bastiat had the wonderful essay where he describes what's known as the fallacy of the broken window, which I won't go over real fast. But again, because people have heard about it before. But the upshot of that is that there's always an opportunity cost in anything. So if a window's broken and you have to replace it, people will say, well, look, he spent money to replace the window. That's going to stimulate the economic activity. And they forget that he can't spend that money on something else. Well, if we're going to induce, whatever, young people into spending a year or two in sort of these government-approved programs, what aren't we getting? What would those kids be doing? Some of them might become entrepreneurs. And who knows what they would be producing that would help even low-income people because they produce some good or found a way to make some good cheaper. Or they would go to college maybe and embark on a course of study where they become a doctor or something like that. So it's not like there's no cost here aside from the obvious tax cost. There is a cost in the fact that people would have been doing other things. And it's arrogant for the planners to think, oh, well, we know that this is a better use of time. They have no basis for saying that.
Yeah, so they hurt everyone. They hurt the person that's going into the program. They hurt the taxpayers that are having to fund it. And they hurt the recipients of the programs because they end up jacking with people's lives and harm them in ways that are oftentimes immeasurable. But in any event, the debate's over at cato-unbound.org. Feel free to weigh in. I think it's already a lively time there. They just posted my article. They had the other three last week, and then we're going to be doing some more debating, the four panelists, and there's going to be a lot of comments from people. So, Sheldon, let's shift gears over to Syria. Kind of interesting how this thing's turned out, that here Obama was set and determined that he was going to bomb Syria. And, people were raising national security, the old standard bugaboo term, national security is at stake and, WMDs again, surprise, surprise. And then all of a sudden, at the last minute, he says, okay, never mind. I'm going to go ask for Congress, not for their consent, but just for them to endorse my action. I'm going to do it anyway if I want to, but I want them to come on board with me here. And then Kerry happens to let out this inadvertent statement that says, well, if they would just get rid of their chemical weapons, maybe we could work a deal. And the Russians grabbed onto that. So it's really funny, after vilifying Putin and all this, now they're having a deal with him and cater to him and negotiate with Putin. And Putin's got this really funny op-ed in the New York Times last week. And my hunch is that the Russians are just playing him like a fiddle. And they're going to drag out this thing. They're going to, come up with all kinds of excuses and terminology and so forth in the resolutions. And that this thing's not going to be accomplished the way that Obama would like to see it accomplished, with the destruction of all these chemical weapons. But even if it is, Sheldon, look at the results of this thing. The rebels are now terribly angry at the United States, because they were hoping for the bombing campaign to be a regime change operation, which would enable them to gain some momentum on the battlefield. They've been losing big time. And so they figured, with some bombs coming in here, we may be able to have some opportunities here to break through lines and get the momentum back. So now they're angry at the United States. Darn sure the Syrian regime is never going to be happy with the United States, even though we're over there negotiating with their ally, the Russians, and so forth. It's just another classic example by getting embroiled in these foreign conflicts, the people that pay the price are the American people. And they ask us, why do they hate us? Well, here's a classic example of why they hate us. U.S. government intervention. It always makes the matter worse.
Yeah, I think Obama was relieved that Putin made the offer. According to Obama, and I think other people, he and Putin actually discussed this very idea in St. Petersburg when Obama was over there for the G20. So I'm not sure it was really a slip by Kerry. And Obama clearly seemed reluctant about the whole thing to begin with. I think he was really torn on whether he wanted to even get involved in this. I think he was pushed into it by Samantha Power, his UN ambassador, and Susan Rice, his national security advisor, who were both very hawkish. They were hawkish on Libya. And so I think he reluctantly did that, and which is why I think he then decided against their advice, apparently, to judge by the reporting, to send it to Congress. So I thought it looked like he could buy some time, and maybe he'd feel better about it if Congress supported it. But of course, Congress was heading the other way. And so Putin's offer then really gave him a chance to climb down, and I think he was actually happy to have it. A couple of cautions. I mean, I don't know. Putin has an interest in seeing those chemical weapons destroyed, for one thing, because he doesn't want it to end up in the hands of Islamic jihadis, because he has his own problems with Chechnya, which of course is Muslim, and there's been a lot of violence on both sides. The Russians have been pretty bad to the Chechens, but there's been some violent Chechen backlash against the Russians. So he certainly doesn't want to see those weapons fall into the hands of Islamic radicals and then spread to former Soviet republics. So he does have an interest. I think he may well want to see those things turned over to an independent third party and then destroyed. My fear is that if it does go on too long, and if Obama can portray Putin and Assad as simply doing this to delay things, that will embolden him on the military side and a lot of members of Congress as well. So we could end up doing what Obama said he had decided to do originally, and unfortunately with a lot more public support, because they could whip up the public and say, look, we gave diplomacy a chance. We really did. It went on for several months. Now we can see they're just dragging their feet. We have no choice but to go. And a lot of people may at that point buy it. I hope not. I think it's one more interesting point I hope it's interesting that I may to make about this. I think we have a clear case here where the Constitution did not prevent this attack. Obama claims he can do it, as you said, without congressional authority. Many members of Congress, even ones who oppose action in this case, nevertheless agree that Obama can do it without congressional authority. John Bolton, for example, who's not in Congress but a leading neocon, said when Obama first made his announcement, and he said, I disagree that we should be taking action in this instance, but I agree with Obama. I'm glad he's asserting that he has the power to do this without congressional authorization. So the Constitution couldn't stop him. But what did stop him, at least so far, hopefully, for good? The people stopped him. The people didn't want this. They inundated their members of Congress with letters and emails saying, do not do this. That put the fear in many members of Congress, and that's why Obama was staring at a defeat, at least in the House and maybe even in the Senate. And that's why Putin offered him a rope ladder to get out of this mess, at least so far.
Yeah, it also ought to give comfort to libertarians, that people that get very despondent and say, oh, what chance do we have? Well, this shows that if you can influence public opinion where people, a critical mass of Americans, adopt libertarian principles and the libertarian philosophy, it goes to show you that what you can accomplish in terms of influencing members of Congress. Most of them are chameleons. They will change their colors in response to what the public opinion is saying. There are very few dyed-in-the-wool ideologues. And so that's why we continue doing what we do as libertarians, spreading ideas on liberty, not focusing so much on Washington, but focusing on the American people with the idea that they can bring about a major transformation. But I blogged today, Sheldon, about the role of the military in this, the massive standing army that we've had since World War II, the Cold War era, national security state, a vast military industrial complex, CIA, and so forth. I mean, they play a big role in this because while they claim to, or while they do take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, as I pointed out in my blog, really their allegiance is to the president, not to Obama personally, but whoever the president happens to be. That they, as a practical matter, they will carry out any orders that he orders them to do. And we see a classic example of this on the Syria thing. Clearly, it's unconstitutional. Everybody acknowledges that the Congress has the power to declare war under our form of government. You may have people like Bolton are saying, well, let's ignore that. It's outdated or whatever. But no one can deny that that's the law and that the president is violating the law when he wages war. Well, he can't wage a war unless he has a giant military at his disposal. And that is, he doesn't have to go to Congress and raise an army to attack Syria. He's already got an army, a massive army, the most powerful in history. And it's really his personal army. It's at his beck and call. The soldiers are going to obey whatever orders he issues. Notice that not one single soldier, officer, enlisted man said, I'm not participating in this Syrian attack, Mr. President, because I've got an oath to fulfill, and that's to support and defend the Constitution, and that requires a congressional declaration of war. So whether it's torture, assassination, whatever, he's got this massive personal military force at his disposal, which is really what makes the executive branch the most powerful branch. Congress isn't going to jack with it because they know they can't. How do they stop something like this? That's why they go along with it. Same with the federal courts. They know they can't enforce the Constitution on the declaration of war. Why bother? The military would never permit them to enforce it. So I think there's another angle here as to why it's imperative, why our the framers, the founding fathers, oppose standing armies, oppose this whole concept of a national security state. And that's where we libertarians, I think, have to continue raising people's vision that just this victory, it's a nice victory on Syria, maybe short term, as you point out, but the larger victory has got to come in terms of a paradigm shift to the absence of a warfare state for America.
Well, sure, I agree. It's bad that things have turned around where it's considered a proper role of government to police the world. But of course, even that, as somebody recently reminded me, calling it policing the world is really almost too nice a gloss on it, because it gives you the picture of sort of a neutral cop on the beat who doesn't play favorites. He's just there to enforce the law. But that's not been what that does not characterize U.S. foreign policy over the last how many decades. It's a very narrowly self-interested foreign policy designed to serve particular geopolitical and economic interests. It doesn't serve the interests of the American people in general, because it all does is cost them, trillions of dollars. It results in their being spied on by the government and subjected to the danger of possible terrorism, because the government's creating enemies everywhere. But it is serving somebody's interests, the people that make the policy, and on people on behalf of whom they make the policy. So it's almost too nice a phrase to say policeman of the world. It should not be an international hegemon. It should not be taking the position that George H.W. Bush took 1990, 1991, when he decided he was going to drive Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait, where he said, "What we say goes." A phrase I'll never forget. But that's the attitude. That is the attitude of American policymakers. What we say goes. The problem is what we say, quote, what we say doesn't go. It's a delusion that the U.S., since it's the only surviving superpower, calls the shots. It does not call the shots. The world is out of control. The Middle East is pretty much out of control. And it's just the policymakers haven't quite woken up to it. This idea that they can manage events in the Middle East is completely delusional, because they can't.
No, and what they end up doing, you've got a fire going on, and so that they go in there with the pretense that they're going to put out the fire, and they put it out by pouring gasoline on it. And so we'd be better off just leaving the U.S. government out of it. Working on ourselves here at home, establishing a free society here at home that the world can emulate. And if people are hurting overseas with oppression or whatever, we've talked about this before. Open the borders, that's one idea. Give people sanctuary that can escape the tyranny, the oppression, the starvation, or whatever. Don't go bomb them. Just let them come here and earn a living. And second, go abroad yourself. Why doesn't John Bolton go over there and join the rebels? He can't give me the excuse that he's too old. That's nonsense. They can use anybody of any age. Why doesn't he himself take individual and personal responsibility and go over there and fight on behalf of the Syrian rebels? Well, of course, it's because of this notion of vicarious courage, where he gets his courage by virtue of the troops that he wants to get involved in another war, with obviously the hope that this one will finally turn out better than the other.
Well, in fairness to Bolton and some of the other critics, they don't like the rebels. This is where things get very complicated. Some of the rebel factions, which are like the Jabhat al-Nusra, is linked with Al Qaeda, and they are committing unspeakable atrocities against Christians. The Christians back Assad. Assad had protected the Christian minority because Assad himself is of a minority Islamic sect, so he was protecting other minorities, including Christians. The Christians are not on the side of the rebels, and so I can see why there are a lot of conservatives who are very nervous about the rebels for that and other reasons. And so I didn't want to leave the impression that Bolton should go join the rebels. Maybe he'd want to go join Assad's side then if he wants to put his money where his mouth is. The point is that's one. I mean, aside from the principled moral argument against intervention, there's even just this practical side that both sides are no good for the most part. I mean, there may be parts of the rebel opposition who are more secular, who would want a more civil society that was something close to liberal. I mean, I don't know. But the point is the dominant factions, the ones that are doing most of the fighting and doing some pretty terrible things, are not of that nature. They are radical Islamists, and we wouldn't want to. I don't think anybody would want to see them triumph. But on the other hand, Assad is also a bloody dictator, so you stay out. I mean, joining an orgy of violence is not humanitarian intervention.
Well, isn't it true that the CIA is funneling weapons now into the rebel camps?
Well, I don't know that the weapons actually started up. Obama announced back in March, after the first allegations about chemical weapons use, was that we were going to move now from supplying non-lethal aid, I guess mainly money and supplies, to lethal aid. But they claim, of course, that they can vet the recipients of this of the arms, that they know that they can get it into the hands of the more secular liberal groups. I have a great deal of doubt about that, because even if they put it in the hands of Faction A, tomorrow the guns may be taken away by Faction B. They don't want that guns. They don't want to have the guns. So. And I'm not sure whether guns are actually flowing yet. I've heard criticism that while Obama had announced the policy, the guns actually weren't flowing. But we've been involved a very long time. The U.S. government's been involved on the anti-Assad side, for quite a while in various forms. Plus, don't forget our allies, Saudi Arabia, U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait probably have been funding rebels because they're anti-Assad.
Yeah, sort of our proxies. Well, my point, regardless of what side Bolton happens to be on or any of these other people, go take individual responsibility yourself. Go over there. Start up a new rebel base, where you bring your own kind of people in. You can bring more conservatives in, try to take reins of the government. In other words, just take individual responsibility. And that's what none of these people will do. They always want to send the government in. But here is their perfect opportunity to go over there, establish a brand new rebel force that's going to prevail over the other rebel forces. But no, they don't want to do it. They want the government to do it. Let me shift gears a little bit again on the Federal Reserve, because that's back in the news. Notice that Lawrence Summers, who apparently was Obama's favorite, that he's bowed out because he couldn't get enough support to be the new chairman of the Federal Reserve. And so now Obama's scrambling around to find somebody new. And in the midst of all this, of course, is the debt ceiling debate. All the same old scare tactics are already coming up, that, the recovery is going to be impeded if we don't lift the debt ceiling, which is effectively saying, let me continue spending more and more and more money, and we'll just put it on the credit card. We'll just add to the debt. that the American taxpayer is ultimately going to have to pay. And we all know what the Fed's done in history. The debt gets so large that they monetize it. They start effectively printing the money to pay off the debt. And so it's the same old stuff, Sheldon. I mean, it doesn't change. It's your old status box. That they're in this box. The Federal Reserve, they consider as an essential part of a free society. It's a massive way to defraud people, debase the currency, and they argue over who should be the chairman. It's compared to us libertarians that say dismantle it, have a free market monetary system, which is the key to freedom and peace and prosperity.
Well, it looks like it'll be the other main contender, Janet Yellen, who's the vice chairman, and a lot of people are pushing for her over Summers anyway. So with Summers taking himself out, most likely it will be her. She will just carry on Bernanke's policies. I think the government and the Fed are even more boxed in than ever because I think they know that inflation is not a way out of the debt problem because the moment they actually inflate and where the money is getting out into the economy, interest rates will shoot up, and so the government won't have solved this problem at all. At the moment, the reason the money creation isn't doing that is because they're paying the Fed, they're paying the banks interest, and in effect they're printing money and then borrowing the money immediately from the banks. So it's not getting out to and the banks therefore leave it in their Fed accounts. It's not getting out into the economy, which is why we're not seeing the effects we would expect from money creation. I think they know they can't inflate their way out of this because the markets are much more sophisticated than ever. Information travels faster than ever. People will see right away what the government is doing, what the Fed is doing. They'll shift out of the dollar. Interest rates will immediately spike, and the administration doesn't want that, and Bernanke doesn't want that because that will crush what they call a recovery. It's not much of a recovery, but it'll even crush that if interest rates suddenly rise. So they got a real problem on their hands. I don't think this debt is legitimate. I mean, they can't borrow legitimately on behalf of the American people, and I think they're going to end up having to repudiate it, which I think would both be a good thing. But I think they're going to find that they have no choice but to repudiate some or all of the debt.
Well, what I find fascinating is that they never talk in terms of decreasing government spending from the time they lift the debt ceiling and allow more debt to be done. You'd think they'd say, okay, we got past this one. Hey, let's start slashing government spending, and instead they laugh as soon as the debt ceiling's lifted with all the Chicken Little stuff, and they just laugh. They continue spending, getting ready for the next time, which of course the next time's arrived, and they're starting the game all over again. My position is just let the debt ceiling stay there, and no more. They can't go out and borrow, so they have to live within their means. You got a balanced budget. I mean, it's not ideal from a libertarian perspective because they still got all the junk they're funding, like the drug war and welfare and so forth. But at least they're living within their means. I mean, here's a chance for them to have a balanced budget, live off of tax revenues that are coming in. But, of course, that's not going to happen because the Republicans are no different from the Democrats. They're all big spenders. Anyway, that's the show, Sheldon. Greatly enjoyed it. This is the Libertarian Angle, sponsored by the Future of Freedom Foundation. Come over and visit us at fff.org and Facebook and Twitter. And love to hear from you. We've got a great monthly journal called Future of Freedom that Sheldon edits. We also have a fantastic FFF Daily, our email publication, which consists of a collection of fantastic editorials and op-eds every day. So I'd love for you to become a part of the Future of Freedom Foundation, become one of our supporters, and help us to restore and achieve a free society for America. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.